Okay, in this video, we're going to look at section 5B, asking the question, should you believe a statistical study? Okay. All right. Now, most statistical research is carried out with integrity and care. Nevertheless, bias can arise in many ways, making it important to examine reports of statistical research carefully. In this unit, we're going to discuss the 8 guidelines that can help you answer the question, should I believe a statistical study? Now, the following box summarizes the guidelines that we will discuss in this section. Starting with, and here's the box right here, starting with number 1, you want to get a big picture view of the study. And what you want to do here is understand the goal of the study, the population that was under study, and whether the study was observational or an experiment. And then second, you want to consider the source. You want to look for potential sources of bias on the part of researchers. And then third, look for bias in the sample. You want to decide whether the sampling method was likely to produce a representative sample. And then fourth, look for problems in defining or measuring the variables of interest. Now here, ambiguity in the variables can make it difficult to interpret reported results. And next, you want to be aware or beware of confounding variables. If the study neglects potential confounding variables, its results may not be valid. And then number 6, consider the setting and wording in the surveys. You want to look for anything that might tend to produce inaccurate or dishonest responses. And then number 7, you want to check that results are presented fairly. You want to check whether the study supports the conclusion or conclusions that are presented in the media. And then finally, stand back and consider the conclusions. You want to evaluate whether the study achieved its goals, and if so, do the conclusions make sense and have practical significance? Now we're going to go into more detail of each one of those 8 guidelines, and then we're going to do an example of each one of them. So we're going to start off with guideline number 1. The first guideline states, get a big picture view of the study. And that is, you want to try to answer the following questions. What was the goal of the study? What was the population of the study? Was the population clearly and appropriately defined? And was the study observational or an experiment? If it was an experiment, was it single or double blind? And were the treatment and control groups properly randomized? Given the goal, was the type of study appropriate? Okay, sometimes some studies may not be appropriate for that particular goal that you're trying to attain. Okay, so let's look at an example of that. Now here, based solely on the given information, is there reason to question the results or the method, and explain your reasoning? So in this case, we have a survey of hourly wages of fast food workers in a large city. It samples 20 workers from each of 10 fast food restaurants. We want to know if it's valid or not and why. Well, in this case here, if you look at it, got 20 workers each from 10 fast food restaurants. If you do 20 times 10, you're going to get 200. So you do have a fairly decent sample of 200 people from fast food restaurants. So in this case here, it is a valid study, okay? And that's because the entire sample is large and it is diverse, okay? All right, now let's look at guideline number 2, and that is consider the source. Statistical studies are supposed to be subjective, but the people who carry them out and fund them may be biased, like in this example. Okay, so do we have a reason to question the results of the following hypothetical study and explain why? And it is a step where you have a study by a conservative foundation is designed to assess a new democratic spending plan. Well, in this case here, we have a conservative foundation that might be a funded organization that might fund that particular study, and they're only assessing a new democratic spending plan. So there might be bias here. So here we have to choose answer F, that there is a reason and a possibility of bias in the study. Okay. So that was guideline number 2. Now, guideline number three is to look for bias in the sample. There are 2 types. One is selection bias, the other one is participation bias. Selection bias occurs when researchers select their sample in a way that tends to make it unrepresentative of the population. Okay. And then participation bias occurs primarily with surveys and polls. It arises when people choose whether to participate, because people who feel strongly about an issue are more likely to participate. Their opinions may not represent the larger population. Okay? Because, with participation, if they feel strong about a situation or an issue, they're gonna more likely be participating in that survey. And that's only, sometimes when you do collect data, that data could be only from those who have chosen to respond, and it might not be the opinion of the entire population. And I think example 3 is like that. Here we go. Okay, we want to determine if there is a reason to question the results of this study. A TV talk show host asked the TV audience, do you support new national mileage standards for automobiles, and asked people to vote by telephone at a toll-free number? Well, in this case here, there is some reason to question this particular study. And here are some reasons. One is the wording of the question might produce an inaccurate or dishonest response. Okay. Another reason would be that the TV audience might not be representative of a population. Okay. That could be a big question. It's just what the TV audience thinks, but it's not going to be of the entire population. And another reason would be that those call-in polls, they tend to be biased. Okay. It's usually, those polls are based on those who choose to respond or choose to call in. Is not representative of the entire population. So do be aware of those types of studies. Now, guideline number 4 deals with looking for problems in defining or measuring the variables of interest. Now, a variable is going to be any item or quantity that can vary or take on different values. So if you had a math class before, you've been introduced what a variable is. Usually it can be any letter of the alphabet from A through Z, representing an unknown. It can take on various different values. Same thing here. An item or a quantity that can vary or take on different values. The variables of interest in a statistical study are the items or quantities that the study seeks to measure. So in this example, do we have a reason to question the results of this study? Researchers designed 5 survey questions to determine whether Norwegian citizens are happier than American citizens. And is there a reason to question these results here? Well, here's a couple of reasons we could question this. One, it's not clear how that variable of interest is going to be measured, like the word happy, happier. I don't think we can measure someone's happiness. That's hard to measure. So that would be a question. Also, we don't know what happy means. Happy may be something for one person, but not for the other. Okay, so we don't know what happiness means. So, yeah, there is a reason to question for those 2 reasons. So here you have to select all that apply from those answer choices. Okay. Okay, guideline number 5. Beware of confounding variables. Now, those are variables that are not intended to be part of the study, and it can sometimes make it difficult to interpret the results properly. Such variables are often called confounding variables because they confound or confuse a study's results. Okay, so you want to be aware of any confounding variables here. So like in example 5, we got researchers concluding that body mass index is the single most important factor in predicting the performance of world-class swimmers. Would that be a valid or an invalid result? In this case here, they're not going to be valid. The results and the method itself will be invalid. The reason for that is this is the single most important factor. We need to look at other factors as well. Okay. When you're predicting the performance of world-class swimmers, we need to look at other factors other than just the body mass index. Okay. Okay, now guideline number 6 deals with considering the setting and wording in surveys. Now, even when a survey is conducted with proper sampling and with clearly defined terms and questions, it is important to watch out for problems in the setting or wording that might produce inaccurate or dishonest responses. Like in this case right here. Okay, we want to know if we have a reason to question the results of this survey. Here, sociologists studying domestic violence circulate a questionnaire by asking each respondent if she or he has ever abused a spouse or partner. In this case, there are reasons to question this particular survey, okay? And that's because even the wording of the question can produce an inaccurate or dishonest response. Okay? Because that person can just easily lie and say that they didn't abuse a spouse ever, and they're still doing it. Another reason would be if they're receiving a questionnaire that might not be the representation of that population. So here, they're circulating a questionnaire. And that's where could they circulate that questionnaire? And, they could be circulating that in various places. And those people in those various places that get that questionnaire won't be a representation of that entire population. Another reason would be that self-reporting would not often be accurate. It's often not accurate. So there are some reasons for questioning that particular, those results. Okay, guideline number 7. Check that results are presented fairly, because the study may be misrepresented in graphs or concluding statements, and researchers may interpret the results or misinterpret the results or jump to conclusions not supported by the results. Now, in this particular example, number 7, we want to decide whether the stated claim is believable and justify the conclusion. In this case here, new diet program claims that 200 randomly selected participants lost up to 15 pounds in 6 weeks, and that the program works for anyone with enough discipline. Okay. I'm going to find that questionable. Okay. Because of the fact, and in this case it will be this choice. One person losing 15 pounds would validate it if even no one else lost any weight. Okay. And are we sure that 200 people randomly selected will lose 15 pounds? Not really. But, one person could validate that particular study that lost the 15 pounds if no one else does. Okay, and finally, guideline number 8 is to stand back and consider the conclusions. You want to ask yourself the following questions. Did the study achieve its goals? Do the conclusions make sense? Can you rule out alternative explanations for the results? If the conclusions do make sense, do they have any practical significance? So in this example here, we want to decide whether we believe the stated claim and justify the conclusion. The local Chamber of Commerce claims that the average number of employees among all businesses in town is 12.5. Now, is there a reason to question this claim? Well, in this case, I would say the answer is no, because the Chamber of Commerce would not have a reason to distort its data. Okay. All right, so those are your 8 guidelines here that we talked about in this section 5B. And that will conclude this video on asking the question, should you believe a statistical study?